In Manitoba Sports Hall of Famer Susanne Dandenault to the program. Susanne, welcome to Winnipeg Sports Talk. How are you?
I'm great, Andrew. Thanks for having me on.
It's a real pleasure. You have you're involved in so many things, and it is a perfect topic for us here on our It Takes a Community to Play segment. But first of all, just quickly give people a rundown of your time as an athlete in both athletics and weightlifting.
You know what? It was an honor to be able to participate at the levels I did in track and field. Started early in junior high, I'm going to say, progressed through to going to the University of Washington on an athletic scholarship, which was a wonderful experience. Unfortunately, they lost in the national championship this year, but I was
Oh,
right there
tough.
cheering them on. And then came back home and continued, pursuing my athletic career. I was on the national junior team in track and field prior to going out to Seattle, but loved every moment of that. Came home, saw that maybe the future wasn't as bright as I'd hoped in track and field. It would have been very difficult to get to an international level as a senior athlete. So started tinkering in weightlifting, which my good friend Teresa Brick convinced me to come and try a bit more seriously than I had been. And that was really the sport that took me around the world. And I was fortunate enough to be a national team member for 9 years, 9-time national champion, and was the first woman in Canada to clean and jerk 300 pounds, and the third woman in North America to do that task. So couldn't do that without the community behind me of coaches and medical staff and the support of weightlifting and track and field and Sport Manitoba generally. So, it was always a commitment of mine to give back where possible. So that brings me to where we are today.
Just quickly on your athletic career. It is an interesting transition, but we do see that often with people that, excel in one form that maybe realize that, there's a certain ceiling to it and then pivot to another sport where you sort of have a big step ahead. And I think that was pretty clear from going from athletics to weightlifting. You were pretty much set from everything that you'd done before in a totally different sport.
Yeah, it's certainly there are a number of transitions that work really well in sport and gymnastics to weightlifting. There's a few of them, and I wasn't ready to enter the real world, let's call it, in a 9 to 5 job and things like that. So having another outlet in sport certainly was an attractive pursuit. And Teresa Brick is a hell of a negotiator, so I really have to chalk it up to her persistence as, trying to get me into the gym and getting another female involved in weightlifting, to be honest. So it was an easy transition, and like I said, I wasn't quite ready to give up the sport thing, and I'm very happy that I didn't.
Susanne, you're the founding member of the Manitoba Athletes Association. Tell us about founding something like that and what the goal was and how important it was to you as an athlete to create that body.
Of course, there had already been a movement nationally with the Canadian Athletes Association, which is kind of how we got that MAA acronym. The Canadian version of it has become Athletes Can, which still exists today with a lot of power and influence in how athletes are treated. And this really all came from like the boycotts in the 80s and how athletes were the ones paying the price for when a country would boycott. Why should it be the athletes that don't get to participate? So, athlete rights have always been important to me and to many. And I wasn't the only one. Andrew Lamont from rowing, we had a number of people involved in Winnipeg who felt the same way. And with the support and suggestion from Sport Manitoba, which is fantastic that we have a sport organizing body here in this province that sees the need and importance of athlete rights. So, it was really all of that came together with a bunch of people who just have a deeper interest and passion for sport and for those who participate. So it was wonderful to be there. It's been defunct, to be honest, for a while now, but I think the concept of athlete rights remains top of mind in the provincial sport organizations in Manitoba.
You moved on at one point, became president of the Manitoba Weightlifting Association. As a former athlete, I'm sure you had I mean, a special, unique view, especially at such a high level. But a lot of times people are sort of like, oh, they're burnt out after doing it. Why was it important to you to stay within the sport, moving into that role to help the future generation of weightlifters?
It's an interesting observation, and weightlifting, not a big sport. You don't have a large pool to pick from when you're looking for leadership, and part of it is you're in the sport. You have other people who remain in the sport. You want to see it succeed. So if people aren't stepping up at the time, then I typically am the kind of person that will step up, and I bridged a time frame. We had more people come to the table nearing the end of my tenure, and I felt it was okay to walk away from that role in the organization. But at that time, you can always find a bit more time. Like I'm not someone to sit around and not be doing something. So if I'm not working on something, I'm bored. So it seemed necessary, and I'm very happy I did it. Also gives you a perspective on that leadership looking down to help you be a better leader in other ways.
Well, of course, I mean, continuing to lead. I mean, you're the current board chair of Sport Manitoba. I mean, can you talk about why it's to you been important to stay involved and continue making these contributions to obviously a sport and sport in general that's been such a big part of your life?
So the appointment to the Sport Manitoba presidency came as a government appointment, but extremely proud and honored to be seen to be fit to play that role, and especially as the first woman to do it. So I feel I'm bringing a perspective unique to this role for the first time. Female, retired competitive athlete, multi-sport. I do think that what I can bring here is significant, and it's a great group to work with. And again, just whatever I can do to give back. Sport has given me so much. I attribute everything that I do today and the characteristics I have to my involvement in sport. And if I can give back, then I will. And to do it as the president of Sport Manitoba will be the pinnacle of my leadership in sport, and it's what I owe to the sport and the province for the support they've given me to date. And I've taken the bull by the horns here, and I'm excited to see what I can do to support sport in the province.
Susanne Dandenault is with us on Winnipeg Sports Talk as part of It Takes a Community to Play with Sport Manitoba. I wanted to ask you about the significance of the entire sport community working to both recruit but also train and retrain athletes, coaches, and officials, because all of those roles are so incredibly important, not to mention the volunteers that make every sport happen at pretty much every level.
It's I don't think I realized the enormity of the task until I became the president of the chair. The chair of the board of directors. The magnitude was lost on me as to how many people we're talking about, and I can really appreciate all the work Sport Manitoba does in guiding the sports across Manitoba. It's not an easy task. You're right, and people are taxed for their time. It really is someone who's passionate about what they do in sport to keep them in. And how can we continue to encourage those people to remain active? Because you can't have a competition without a coach, without the athlete, without an official, and without the volunteers. So if we run dry in any of those areas, we are in a predicament. And I feel Manitobans really take pride when they can say their daughter, their friend, their classmate is on the national team competing at the Olympics. We don't want to lose that. So Sport Manitoba plays a huge role in working with the provincial sport organizations to help continue to develop all of these areas within sport. And to be honest, Manitoba Liquor Lotteries really stepped up to help us do this in last year with their substantial 3-year contribution. It really makes some of the things we're trying to do, they're giving us a better platform to do that. So I really do have to applaud their commitment to sport in Manitoba.
Susanne, I wanted to circle back to something you mentioned about Teresa Brick earlier, in that you would come from athletics and she was a real hard negotiator to try to get you into weightlifting. At this point, going into 2024, from your perspective, how far have we come along with athletic opportunities for girls and females as well, and in some more niche sports, if you will, like weightlifting, that you don't historically associate with women, although they're winning Olympic gold medals and doing incredible things around the world?
Absolutely, they are. I I'm going to suggest that there is always more that can be done, um, and truly for opportunities for Manitobans of any gender and any ability. It's a limitation in Canada to be able to provide enough of those opportunities to all of our athletes. I do feel Manitoba is ahead of the game in terms of supporting its female athletes, or and female and those identifying as female, and those who are neutral in their gender identity. I do feel Manitoba supports those areas maybe better than some. And you know what, I haven't done a ton of research across the country of what that sport looks like, but speaking from my own experience, um, there are opportunities out there. They can always be more. And sometimes you have to go hunt for them yourself. But I feel that's the Canadian system, unfortunately. We're not as focused on the development across the country until you get to that level where it makes sense to give a bit more effort. And so I feel that there's always more that can be done. But that said, we're doing pretty good with what we're doing.
Susanne, one final message, and I always try and bring it back when we're having these conversations with people from across the sporting landscape. From and you have such incredible experience at literally every level. A message to former athletes that might be missing it, or thinking about, contributing back in some ways, as well as people that maybe have an interest in the sport but don't have that great history or connection, as to how much of a difference and impact they can make to the sport, but also for themselves through things like officiating, as well as just volunteering and making events in this sport keep going.
I cannot encourage everyone enough to participate in any way they can. You may think that coming out to one competition to officiate once may be not enough, but it's not true. Every little bit helps, whether you are someone completely new to sport, which there will be a ton of people out there like that. Please come and try. We are looking, I'll say, every sport is looking for directors to sit on their board to give them some guidance, and it doesn't have to be sport specific. It can be anybody. Everybody will bring some nugget of expertise that board may not be aware of. And truly, you don't need that background in sport to be able to make those contributions. For those out there who are retired or are not as involved as they used to be, what a great feeling it is to be back here. And you know what? It's reminiscent. You go back there, you look at the people doing what they're doing, working so hard. You remember doing that, and you do remember the people that were there to support you. And here in Canada and Manitoba, people are not here because it's given them a lot of money or power or fame. They are there because they love the sport. So, if you loved the sport at one point, hopefully we can encourage you back to keep helping out, because everything makes a difference.
This has been so much fun. Gang, if you're thinking about, finding more about opportunities to get involved, go to sportmanitoba.ca. There's a ton of information there about it. And to the honored member of the Manitoba Sports Hall of Fame, Susanne Dandenault, thanks so much for the time. It was great having you on Winnipeg Sports Talk.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I appreciate your time as well.
That's another Takes a Community to Play with Sport Manitoba, brought to you by Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries on Winnipeg Sports Talk.